Now, the World Economic Forum on Africa recently took place in Cape Town, South Africa. One of the hot topics of discussion was the role of technology as a catalyst for economic growth on the continent. I caught up with Microsoft's GM for Africa Initiatives, Fernando de Sousa, to share his thoughts on the subject. On the set joining me now is Fernando de Sousa, the General Manager for Africa Initiatives at Microsoft. Fernando, welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Now, we're sitting with 675 million cell phone users on the African continent. We've seen success stories like the Ubuntu OS, M-Pesa, Ushahidi. The role of technology is clear in economic acceleration and growth, but we're also sitting with a range of impediments: infrastructural, regulatory, developmental. How do we bridge this gap?
Well, I think we start by looking at all of those issues not as impediments but as opportunities, and I think we can address every single one of them very specifically and very systematically, because I think if you think about infrastructure, so if Africa were to copy the rest of the world and try and build the same kind of infrastructure, it's not probably going to work. So let's leapfrog. So let's use the African innovation to do that. Possibly I would highlight something that we are doing and we've introduced in Kenya. And in fact, I'm very, very happy to talk about today, because we're announcing today the same thing in Tanzania, which is the deployment of TV white spaces.
Yes.
As a broadband technology. So that's, and I will expand on this a little bit later, but I think that's one way of addressing, say, infrastructure. Regulatory and advocacy and policy, I think, is a huge opportunity, because I think governments across Africa are so much looking for ways to bring their own service delivery to their citizens. And so I think if we work with them as partners, technology can play a huge role. So massive opportunity, massive promise, and I think we can realize it together.
Let's talk about realization. You just mentioned the announcement you made this morning about your new initiative in Tanzania called White Spaces. It's the tapping into the unused radio spectrum frequencies.
Television spectrum.
Is it television
Yes.
spectrum to connect broadband connections, and especially in a continent where we're still struggling with the last mile, even
Yes.
though we have all these undersea cables. What's that doing, and how's that addressing broadband issues, specifically in Kenya and Tanzania?
Okay, so the concept of the technology is, the transition between analog and digital television, terrestrial television broadcast, has left quite a lot of unused spectrum. Now, this is unlicensed, or it's licensed, but it's free broadband, right? So Microsoft has done a lot of research, and we've built software that dynamically allocates the usage of that spectrum, so it doesn't interfere, it doesn't interrupt the television broadcast. We also make it two-way transmission, because of course television is a one-way transmission only, and we use the same infrastructure, and we actually carry the signal all the way down into the rural areas using the standard mast with the little spikes coming out on the side. Together with that, one of the, I think, the interesting innovations that we've worked on is to combine that with solar power and solar panels. And so the radio, the hub, the base station becomes a source of electricity as well.
So it's utilizing the natural sources, the resources that we have.
Resources in the sun, and then taking it. So essentially what you end up is in a place which is completely off the grid. We now bring power and the internet, right? And we do that on a commercial sort of model. So we're really looking for, and we're saying, how do we take this and then turn it into an entrepreneurial opportunity? Because again, addressing the issues of wealth creation, economic development.
How cost effective is the solution?
It's very cost effective. It's extremely cost effective in the sense, and I'll give you a comparison of, say, the base station radios are about $25,000 per base station, and we get about a 10-kilometer range from one to the other, in comparative to other technologies which are in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. So very competitive.
Now, the White Spaces is off the back of an initiative you already have on the African continent called For Africa. It's a 3-year program, $75 million US, and you rolled out in Kenya first.
Yes.
Why Kenya? And does this allude to the fact that Kenya has now been dubbed Silicon Savannah?
Well, that is true. I think, so as far as Microsoft for Africa is concerned, you're right. It's an initial 3-year program, because we wanted to take an opportunity to learn and then do the next 5 years and the next 10 years. So I think realistically it's a very long-term commitment from Microsoft.